people were killed in the first half of this year here in the Bronx in family-related homicides. That is according to the Mayor's Office to Combat Domestic Violence. You're watching the 10th anniversary edition of DIVA Talk. It is a yearly forum on domestic violence brought to you by News 12 The Bronx and the Bronx Borough President's Office. Gladys Ricard was a New York City woman murdered by an abusive former boyfriend back in 1999 on the day she was set to marry someone else. Every year, people come out to mark her death and raise awareness about domestic violence through the Brides March. News 12's Alicia Laventure reports.
A marriage of sorts with a message.
Domestic violence is not only killing women, but it's killing men and it's killing children, and it's time for us to put a stop to it.
Every year, men and women dressed in bridal gowns and tuxedos march down Grand Concourse, rain or shine, and vow to stand against domestic violence.
By the end of the march, most of these dresses are torn up, and that's what a relationship that is living with domestic violence goes through.
News 12 The Bronx was there year after year as brave survivors of abuse and their loved ones give a voice to those who lost their lives.
There's a lot of women that want to come out and say, help me. I don't want to be here no more. I don't want to be a victim.
The Brides March is in memory of Gladys Ricard, who was shot and killed on her wedding day, killed by an ex-boyfriend because she was marrying someone else.
She tried to end the violence in her life when she decided to marry another man who was going to treat her the way she deserved. He decided to kill her.
And in the wake of such tragedy, triumph for those hoping to make a difference.
It's sad, but in a way, I feel happy every year because I see more people.
Alicia, thank you. And joining me now on stage is Grace Perez. She is the coordinator of the Gladys Ricard and Victims of Domestic Violence Memorial Walk. Joanna Berlin is back. She is the Deputy Director of the New York City Family Justice Center here in the Bronx. And also Maureen Curtis, who is the Associate Vice President of Criminal Justice Programs for Safe Horizon. Thank you, the three of you, for being here. Grace, I want to start with you. Why is it so important for all of you to march every single year and remember Gladys?
Well, we want to remember Gladys, and we also want to mourn the countless others that have lost their lives. Not just the battered women themselves, but also the children and family members, and totally individuals that are total strangers to the violence that have also lost their lives. Right here, recently this year, there was a person who he was a superintendent of a building here in the Bronx, and he heard screams while he was doing his work, cleaning the hallway or something that he was doing, and he went towards the screams, and when he got to the door, the batterer who had just physically assaulted and seriously injured the victim turned on him and killed him. And so this was a total stranger to domestic violence, but he became another statistic. So in addition to remembering Gladys Ricard, we mourn and remember the many countless others who have lost their lives to domestic violence. We want to, through mourning those victims and remembering them, we want to raise awareness of the horrors of domestic violence. So that's the reason behind the Brides March, and we want to take it out into the streets and yell at the top of our lungs and walk through the streets and show people that this is a serious thing, and it's no longer an issue that is behind closed doors. This is an antisocial criminal behavior, and we want to let not just victims know that this can happen, and it does happen, that they need to take action, and a decision has to be made in their lives. But we also want to send a message to perpetrators that this is no longer going to be condoned or accepted, and something has to happen.
Joanna, in all of the work that you've done at the Family Justice Center, which is just one resource here in the Bronx for victims, what are the trends that you've seen over the years? Are there more domestic violence cases today or is there just more people coming forward today? What are you seeing?
Well, the New York City Family Justice Center in the Bronx opened in April 2010, so we are continuing every day to still get the word out to Bronx community members that we are open, we are available for survivors to seek support, so we are seeing our numbers increase. Having said that, when we were talking about domestic violence fatalities, while one domestic homicide is obviously one domestic violence homicide too many, since the start of 2012 to October 7th of this year, there was a 31% decrease in family-related homicides in New York City overall, and a 43% decrease in family-related homicides here in the Bronx.
That's impressive. Why do you think that that is?
I think the increased awareness definitely makes a huge difference. People having greater access to services, events like this where people have the opportunity to learn that help is available and that they don't have to continue on in the relationship in silence. As we were talking about with Grace, we want to make sure that people know that help is available and there are other options and choices than staying in the relationship.
And Safe Horizon is just another resource available for people who are suffering, family members and victims as well. Maureen, can you talk about the challenges in fighting domestic violence? What are some of the main ones that you encounter?
Wow, challenges. I think that one of the biggest challenges is even in this day and age with what we know about domestic violence and there's not enough public outrage over violence against women or violence in the home. And I think that raises some challenges for us because, I mean, it's like comparing it to, if you think about driving drunk years ago, 20 years ago, if you were, you know, driving drunk and you were pulled over, what would happen to you? You know, maybe the police officer would tell you to, you know, pull over, take your keys away, or tell you to drive home slowly. Now today, if you drive drunk and you get stopped by the police, you're going to get arrested. If there's a crash or a fatality, you're going to do possibly some serious time. And the reason behind that is because of the serious consequences. And it's not just about, you know, education, it's about consequences in the criminal justice system. But probably most importantly is the public outrage. Mothers against drunk drivers, students against drunk drivers. Now today, if you're in a bar and you're drinking and you're with your friends, you wouldn't think twice about you know, letting your friend walk out of the place without trying to take their keys away from them. And this is something that's common. You know, Joe alluded to this in the session he was talking to, is about how we have to stand up and we have to say, particularly men, when they see their the abuse of their partner or the controlling behavior, they have to say, you know what, that's not okay. That's not okay to do that. And when we start to step up and start doing that more often, we're going to see a difference.
A lot of victims are afraid to come forward. They're afraid to get a restraining order against their abuser. A lot of times they're immigrants and they're even more afraid because of that to come forward. That presents an additional barrier. What would you say to Maureen, to perhaps an immigrant victim who is in a domestic violence situation right now?
Well, for us, we work with anybody who comes to us, any one of our programs, you know, where we provide services for victims of domestic violence. We're going to sit down and we're going to do an assessment. And we're going to talk with that person about their situation, because what works for one person may not work for another. So an order of protection could be enough to prevent that person from further abusing. But for another person, if that victim says to us, well, you know, he has no respect or fear for the law, and I don't believe the order of protection will do anything, then our job is to talk with that person about, okay, well, what options do you think? You know, what have you been doing already to keep yourself safe? You know, and then work from there. You know, maybe it's trying, the person might be interested in shelter, or maybe the person doesn't want to leave. And I think that the other thing that we have to do, and we've learned over the years, is that, you know, we have to make staying okay. You know, if that's what a victim is choosing to do for whatever reason, then, you know, if we're focused on having that person leave, that person may leave because we're, you know, talking to them about leaving. Our job is to help them manage their risk no matter what they decide to do, whether they stay or leave.
And we just have about a minute left. Grace, what is the one thing that you want women or men who are victims to take away from this forum? What's the one message?
It's an antisocial behavior that's destroying families, communities. It's not accepted. It's not part of the Latino culture. It's not part of any culture. It does happen to anyone, regardless of social, economic, educational background. It does happen, and it leads to murder. And to victims, I say, you're not alone. There are many services where 10, 20 years ago there weren't. Today there's a whole host of different services, ethnic related or specific, linguistically specific, where there wasn't many years ago. So my message to victims is get informed. You don't have to make decisions right away the moment you go to a place, but you get information, and then you're better able to make decisions about what you want to do for your life.
Thank you.
And I want to say to batterers, it's not worth it to spend the rest of your life in prison for taking the life of the mother of your children.
Exactly. Thank you so much, the three of you, for being here. And a reminder that the New York City Domestic Violence Hotline number is 1-800-621-HOPE. We'll be right back. PD responded to more than 250,000 domestic violence incidents last year, or more than 700 a day. And that's according to the mayor's office to combat domestic violence. Those are just the people the police department knew about. Imagine all the people who suffered in silence. You are watching the 10th anniversary edition of DIVA Talk, our forum on domestic violence. Joining me now for our last few minutes is domestic violence survivor Tanya McLeod, and Paul from the State Domestic Violence Advisory Board, and Maureen Curtis from Safe Horizon. But before I get to you ladies, the Bronx Borough President's Office has been our DIVA Talk partner since the very beginning. Our Alicia Laventure is standing by now with Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr. Alicia.
As we've mentioned, this is the 10th year of the DIVA Talk Forum, and I'm here with the Borough President, and I want to ask you, why is it important for this office to be involved in forums like DIVA Talk to raise awareness about domestic violence?
Well, as a Borough President, we've been involved in my office on so many different events, and this is something that I wish we didn't have to do, but it's important, and for that I want to thank News 12 for being our partners over the last 10 years, since 2002. We want to thank Pergonis Theater for hosting us over the last 5 years. And I want to thank all of the panelists throughout the 10 years, Tanya, Ann, who's been like the matriarch of these conversations for this last decade as it pertains to domestic violence. Maureen, when you look at Grace and what she's been doing with her Brides March. Melissa Cebollero, who has been doing this with the Borough President's Office and, you know, under my office for so many years. This is important because this is the time where we take our purple shades. This is where we take our lights and we really shine and put a light on, you know, this dark little secrets that is in so many different homes that affect all of us. And it's important for us to not only show women in particular, and men as well, the courage of those that have survived, not only, you know, to bring information to them, and so that we could come together as a borough and as a city. And over the last 10 years, we've made a lot of great gains, and it's important for people to understand that. Right now, every single family court is open to all who want an order of protection. As it stands now, we have 3 justice centers, one in Queens, one in Brooklyn. We just opened up the one in the Bronx, and Manhattan is next, and hopefully we'll get one in Staten Island soon. Over the last 10 years, we've seen how the rate of domestic violence and particularly homicides have gone down. And so this is something that we all need to be proud of, but we also understand that it affects many children, it affects many families, and that if we have to be here for another 10 or 20 years, we will.
And with October being Domestic Violence Awareness Month, what other events is your Borough President's office sponsoring to raise awareness about domestic violence?
Well, we always have people come in on a daily basis to look for services, and we work with the Justice Center. We do the DIVA Talk. We've done DIVA Spa, where we know that this is a lot to do also with how the victims feel. We've done it at the Rotunda, where people come in and they get massages and they get done over, because we know that those abusers are really trying to suppress the confidence in the people that they abuse. So these are a lot of the things that we really address, and for anyone who is out there who feels like they don't have any help, please call our office. Understand that domestic violence is now on the lips of every elected official, particularly those like Naomi Rivera, who has been a leader in this area. And so no longer does someone have to feel like they're all alone. There's so many people here, so many champions, so many courageous heroes and heroines who are prepared to help.
Thank you for that. Andrea?
Alicia, thank you. And Tanya, just briefly, when you make the first call to get help, that's just the first step. What are just a few of the other steps that come after that?
Well, basically, a lot of the steps involve maybe relocating, going into shelter, maybe changing a job, changing schools for the kids. It's a lot of sacrifice on the part of the victim, and that's why it's important to give a realistic view of what that victim might have to do in order to remain safe. And it's unfortunate because abusers aren't held accountable oftentimes for the abuse. Mm-hmm. So the onus is placed on that victim to get out. Oftentimes they're isolated or might not even have financial support. So financial support, a place to stay, a new job where they can flourish and be safe, all of those pieces are important.
And one of the other advocates for domestic violence awareness here in the Bronx is Assemblywoman Naomi Rivera. Alicia is standing by with her.
That's right, I'm here with Assemblywoman Naomi Rivera, and she's been with us here tonight, and she's actually been with us for past years. And Assemblywoman, why is it that it's important for community leaders such as yourself to be involved in forums like DIVA Talk?
Well, as you heard earlier, this is really not just one person's problem. It is a community's problem. And when our children go to school and they're sitting with other children who are either victims of abuse themselves or they're witnessing abuse, this impacts our home and our children and the way they view behavior. And so it's critical that we all lend a voice to this vicious crime. And domestic violence is a crime, and I'm so proud of the Borough President's Office and the work that they have been doing for the last 10 years, in partnership with News 12. I too, once elected to office, started with Mercy College, a silent procession where our youth come out and they talk about domestic violence, and they lend a face to victims of domestic violence through a silent procession. And it is about engaging everyone in this discussion so that it's never too soon to teach our youth what is good relationship, what do good relationships look like, what does love look like, what is bad behavior. It is, too late when one has been a victim and they're dead or they're incarcerated because of domestic violence, and that's what we're trying to avoid, and that's why it's so important that everybody come together as a community. And I'm just so proud of being able to lend a voice as a woman, as a mother. I know that I have 2 sons and that they need to understand that they have a responsibility early on to understand what it means to treat another person that you love with respect.
Thank you so much for that. Andrea?
Maureen, what's one change in the law that you've noticed over the last 10 years in terms of domestic violence?
Well, two laws that went into effect in New York State that have had an impact in the criminal justice system are making stalking and strangulation crimes. Mm-hmm. These are 2 crimes that, before they became a crime in New York State, were very difficult for the police to respond to, and yet they were potentially very lethal. So these have had a significant impact on the officer's ability to make an arrest when they respond on the scene, whereas prior these incidents would be looked on as harassment, which is not an arrestable offense.
And Anne, what does the domestic violence cause, what does the domestic violence fight mean for society? You wanted to talk about that specifically.
Yeah, thank you. I think of the civil rights movement, how the civil rights movement raised us up as a civilization and made us more humane, more human. I believe this is the century, the 21st century is the century for raising up women, for really, truly, way down deep, accepting that women are men's equals, and to really challenge making people do what we want them to do, to really look at abusive power and control and reject it.
And we did get some Facebook comments on our News 12 The Bronx Facebook page regarding domestic violence. I know Alicia Laventure is standing by with some of the questions, or at least one of them that we got from one of our viewers. Alicia?
That's right. Amelia writes, I've noticed that young girls and guys, violence knows no gender, with low self-esteem are more likely to be in abusive relationships because they feel they can't do better. What can we do to help victims feel more confident? Also, I think we need to focus on the abusers as well. Who is teaching them that this is okay to hurt their romantic partners? Where does that come from?
Anne, do you want to tackle that?
Everybody needs basic understanding about domestic violence, about the concept of healthy relationships, and really analyzing what we consider healthy, what mutuality is. The First Lady, Michelle Obama, in one of her early interviews said, a young woman dating should feel good about dating all of the time. That is a really good rubric. We know when a struggle is worth having, and anytime we extend ourselves, it ought to be within the knowledge this is a difficult part of something good.
Tanya, did you want to add to that?
Sure. I just want to add that putting out positive images of what a healthy relationship looks like, the role models in society, providing those services for children who are coming home by themselves, or community programs. These are things that we as a community can provide for young girls and young boys so that they learn from a young age what it is to be in a healthy relationship and to value their own self-worth.
Yeah, that's so important. And we just have a couple minutes left. We do have, it looks like, another question, this one from an audience member. Alicia?
Yes, as a family member of someone who's being abused, when a family member comes to you as a family, what do you tell them? You know?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I mean, I think that telling them that they're not alone, that you're there for them, that help is available, and knowing your limits, you know, depending on who that person is, you know, where they are in the relationship, because I think that, you know, it's important for us to know where we are in that. You know, we may need to refer out to an organization where they're going to be expert in it, but I think most importantly is for that person to know that they can turn to you and that you're there for them, and, you know, as Tanya mentioned, that you're going to support them.
And Maureen, I hate to cut you off. We're unfortunately out of time. I want to thank all of our guests today. Tanya, thank you so much for sharing your personal story. To our panelists, thank you so much for all the work you've done to combat domestic violence. It is so appreciated. Thank you to the Burgonis Theater for hosting us today. If you are a victim, you need to know that you are not alone, as everyone has said here today. You do not have to take the abuse. 1-800-621-HOPE is just one way to get help. And on behalf of News 12 The Bronx and the Bronx Borough President's Office, I'm Andrea Grimes. Thank you for watching.